Okay.
Bruchim Aboyim, welcome everyone. First B'Shu Zara, the village has honored us by attending. First, thank you to Gershon and Rachel for setting up the refreshments. Also, thanks to Gershon for doing publicity, letting people know that this is happening, and making professional looking flyers. Thanks so much for that. Thank you all actually for coming, because you know that the biggest beneficiary of teaching a class is always the teacher himself, because it gives you a chance to study and review what you thought you knew, and to transmit it to somebody else is a whole different level. So thank you all for coming. The question that we're going to try to answer today is Christianity Avoda Zara? How about Islam? So the simple answer is it's not so partial. It's not so simple as to what they really are. And we can start really with the Rambam. The Rambam has an interesting statement that he makes in the beginning. I know Larry has the book. I know some others were going to bring this book. What we're using as a guide, although not completely, this is called Tzurba Merabanan, and it is a system that was developed, I don't know, 25 or 30 years ago. Originally started all in Hebrew. They began translating them into English about 10 years ago, and it's become quite popular. Groups like this are meeting, thousands of groups like this are meeting throughout Israel, all over the world, to discuss these various topics. They're up to volume, I think, 21 already. And we happen to be working with issue number 1, volume number 1. And what they do is they'll start from the earliest sources, and they'll carry the subject all the way down. They'll go to the Torah, if there's Torah, the Mishnah, the Gemara, Rishonim, Achronim, up till the present day. So in our particular case, there's no Torah on Christianity. Why not?
It predates it.
That's right, exactly. And the same thing with Islam. So they start with the Rambam. There's actually a little bit before him, and we're going to get into that a little bit, but the Rambam says that Hanotzrim Ovdei Avoda Zara. He starts out right away that Christians are idol worshippers. The Yom Rishon Hu Yom Edom, and the Gemara in Avoda Zara begins with the discussion of when you're permitted to do business with Ovdei Avoda Zara. And the idea is that if you do business with them, and the Gemara goes into various scenarios, you buy from them, you sell to them, and in general, if they make a business deal with a Jew, it makes them feel good. And if they feel good, they're going to attribute their good feeling to the beneficence of their idol or whatever. It's going to help enhance their worship. So we don't want to do that. So we need to know, when is Yom Edom? When is their holiday? So the Rambam says every Sunday. It happens once a week. Right? Therefore, you're not permitted to do business with them in Eretz Yisrael. Yom Chamishi, Yom Shishi, whether Thursday or Friday. Shebachol, Shabbos, Shabbos, every week. The Ein Tzarech Lomar Yom Rishon Atzmo, certainly not, you don't need to, it goes without saying that Sunday is included. Shehu Aser B'Kol Mokom, you're not allowed to do business with Christians, says the Rambam, anywhere in the world on Sunday. And we have to have the same attitude towards all of their holidays that we have towards Sunday. And then he continues on, who is involved with this? He says, Ger Toshav, who shekibel alav sheva mitzvos kamei shebi'arnu. So he said, a Ger Toshav. So you have in residents of Eretz Yisrael, you have a Ger Toshav is what we might call a legal resident, like somebody that's in the United States with a green card, where they have committed to observe the laws, those that apply to them, but they're not full citizens. And then you have an Ezra. So a Ger Toshav is not a Jew, but he observes the 7 Noachide laws. So that Yeno Oser B'Shasiya Umuto Ba'anaya. So why are we so concerned about kosher wine, for example? And we're concerned Yain Mavushal and all that stuff. And it's because just as we brought offerings in the temple, and the offerings were accompanied by wine, which happens, by the way, to be discussed in today's Daf Yomi. And that's an old theory of mine that we always can relate to what we're learning somehow or other. That's Daf Yomi, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. So the rules relating to the wine of non-Jews are complicated, but certainly if somebody is an idol worshiper, you cannot drink their wine, you cannot sell their wine, you cannot do business with their wine. But if somebody who is in that in-between status where they are observers of the 7 mitzvahs, 7 Noah laws, excuse me, but they're not idol worshippers, so their wine, you are permitted to get benefit from it, sure. And by the way, if anybody has a question, ask it. Don't wait till the end.
I love it.
Come right out.
Even if the wine is kosher?
If the wine, see, that's another question. Why are we concerned about yain mavushal as opposed to kosher wine, right? So kosher wine, which means if you and I went into business together and we produce grapes, and then we hire Larry to make wine with it, and everybody involved is Shomer Shabbos, that wine is kosher. We could all use it for Shabbos, for Kiddush, for our Pesach, the 4 cups. But suppose, I don't know, the gardener outside, so it was lunchtime, he picked up that bottle of wine. What happens now?
Negates it.
He has come in contact with it. So that's a problem, unless...
What if the wine was closed? If the wine was closed.
Even if the wine's closed. Unless that wine was pasteurized. Once the wine has been pasteurized, it's called now yain mavushal. They did not use that type of wine in their temples. It was known that they would only use fresh wine, and therefore it was not a problem. So that's why we're more careful about regular kosher wine, but yain mavushal we can use that. So they don't affect it any longer. So okay, so we're talking about the regular kosher wine or regular wine of these people who are here tosha.
Can they ask a question? A person, a Avoda Zara worshiper, can he sell kosher wine to us that's been pasteurized? It's already been pasteurized. Can we buy a bottle from him?
Why not?
That's what I like to hear. Why not?
What would be right? So, by the way, one year on Chol HaMoed Sukkot, I think it was, my wife and I were in Borough Park. We took a day off. We went shopping in Borough Park, and we walked into a liquor store on 13th Avenue, and there were 2 little kids sitting behind the counter, and we walked in, and a little boy calls out, "Tati, goyim sein du." So the father came out. That, if you don't know Yiddish, he says,
Yeah.
right, Dad, he said, there are non-Jews here because they saw the way that we were dressed. And so the father came out, and I said, goyim hoben geld euch, and we walked out of the store. So you're permitted to do business with, that wine is not considered wine halachically. So it is kosher for Kiddush,
Yeah.
right? But it's not a problem technically as far as yain is. Okay?
So you can use boiled wines without hechsher?
If you use
Pasteurized wine without hechsher. So
the pasteurized wine that was not produced Halacha, no, it's got to start out with kosher.
Okay, so you gotta say that. Okay.
Yeah, you have to start out with kosher wine, and then pasteurize it. And right.
It's gotta be kosher before.
Right. Okay. By the way, Rabbi, if I go off track, you're here for a reason.
There's a reason you're
Fact checker.
So I don't mean that if I go off on a tangent, but if I get into an area that's a little questionable, the rabbi is here. So he says basically they have a little bit different rule because they're not considered to be of the Avoda Zara. So we see the Christians are a certain way, and let's see now what else does the Rambam have to say about the topic of the Avoda Zara. So he says, "V'kein avodas kochavim she'ein oved avodas kochavim kagon elah hayishmaelim." So the Rambam calls the Muslims Yishmaelim. He says they are not idol worshippers. Yenam Asur B'Shasiya, their wine, just like a Ger Toshav, is forbidden to drink it, Umutar Bahaniya. So if you had wine that was made by an Arab, you could do business with it, but you're not permitted to drink it, right? And the Kain Hodu call like Onim, and so Rambam is saying that previous generations agreed with this statement that he's making. And so, why did I say it's not so simple? Because I'm going to read you something that was written by the Rashbam. Rashbam was a grandson of Rashi. Rashi's daughter Yocheved, the oldest daughter, had a son named Shimon, and she married a man named Rabbi Meir, and he was one of the Baalei Tosfos. The Tosfos are commentaries on the Gemara, and very often they are commenting on statements that Rashi's made, and sometimes they're disagreeing with their grandfather or father-in-law, right? And so the Rashbam is one of those, and he makes an interesting comment. He says that this is actually in Parshas V'Yeshev, and he makes a long comment where it starts out with Yeshev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Ovid Eretz Canaan Ela Tolos Yaakov. These are, right, whatever Tolos means, let's say the generations of Yaakov. See, he has a very long comment where he says that, and he quotes the Gemara too, that we're supposed to pay attention to the literal word meaning of the words, right? And the Gemara says in the Gemara Shabbos, there's a quotation that says, "Ein mikra yotze midei pshuta," that at least the literal translation must be taken into account. And Rashi, the indispensable commentator, works mostly, he's sort of translating words. His grandchildren are getting into more or less derivations, and what they're doing is more than just this translating the words. So they say, he quotes a statement, Savina Bartmani, sorry, Shin, I'm 18 years old, Virgasina Kula Talmuda, he's quoting a certain individual. I'm 18 years old, I learned the entire Gemara. V'lo havi yadana ein mikra yotze midei pshuta. And I know there's no such thing that the literal translation of the words is not meaningful. The Gamra Beinu Shlomo Avi Meir, and so too my father, right? My father-in-law. See, he's Avi, the father of my mother. So Meir Ein Avoda, he enlightened the eyes of the diaspora. Shapirish Torah Nevi'im Ksuvim, that he translated. So Rashbam says Rashi translated and commented on the entire Tanakh, and he said that Nasan Lev Lefarish Shuto Shemikra. He was concerned with the literal translation, and now his grandson, the Rashbam, is saying that we need to go beyond that, and it's very interesting to me because I had a kind of relationship with one of my grandfathers anyway. One died when I was quite young. But the other one, I was able to have conversations with him that maybe his own kids couldn't have. He would sort of admit to me certain things, feelings that he'd had. And so Rashbam was talking to his grandfather Rashi. Maybe they're playing chess together, as I played chess with my grandfather. And Rashi said to him, just to paraphrase, that he sort of feels bad about things that he's written in the past, because if he knew then what he knows now, he might have a different attitude. And this is Rashi. This is not. He says. Basically, that's what he's saying. We need to take into account what's happening in the world around us and what's maybe happening in our own lives. You might have a little bit of family dynamics going on because it's a grandson and a grandfather, but he's saying that it pays to look at the total picture. And that's why whenever I'm going to quote somebody, I'm going to give you approximate time that they lived and where they lived. So going on in our book, So here we have we're quoting a Tosfos. This is between 12th and the 14th century. Is Rabbeinu Tam Omer, Mutar Lakabel Himenu Hashvua. So there was a whole issue now, can you do business with a non-Jew or somebody who is let's say a Christian or an Arab? Primarily they talk about Christians here. And the concern is that you may have a business dispute which would require somebody to take an oath. And if something like that happens, can you accept or can you be bound by oaths that they were going to be making in court? Because after all, what is going on in their religion? When they put their hand on the Bible, what are they swearing to, right? His afapi shema shemashkir imahem, that they have what they say, the kavanasim l'davar acher, that they have an idea that there is a God, but there's something else, right? Mikol mokom ein zeh shem avodas kochavim. It's not avodah zara. They say why? Gam datam laose shamayim, because they are thinking of God in heaven, right? V'afalpi shemishtatfin shem shamayim v'davar acher. Even though they make a partnership. I mean, what is Christianity, right? The Trinity. So it's a partnership. So maybe God is a senior partner, but still in all, they have a partnership. So they recognize the existence of the same God that we do. So the Tosfos is saying that it's permitted to do business with them because their oaths are taken basically similar to the way we do. So therefore, he accepts the fact that you can do business with them.
On any day.
Pardon?
On any day.
So well, I don't know about that. This is a situation where you're entering into a business partnership with him, right? So
That's a higher level. Business partnership.
okay.
That's-
Yeah, so that's a good insight, and I can think of certain situations where maybe you have a retail store and you want to be open 7 days a week. You need to have a non-Jewish partner, right? So you can.
And then you're making profits.
What?
You're making profits on Sunday,
So
which is their day of prayer.
Right. So we're going to get into how their observance has kind of been watered down in a certain sense. So they're not so fanatic is a tough word, but they're not so devout, not so strict as they used to be, and therefore maybe we can relax that standard by doing business with them at all. So, but the Shulchan Aruch says, "V'yizor milishtate imakutim," and be careful not to do business with them. Shema yischayev lo shvua, because you might have a situation where you get into a dispute. Maybe you feel like they haven't been keeping accurate records, and you want to know what's going on, so you want to bring them into court and make them swear. He says, and in that case, you're worried because over mishum lo yishma al picha, that you should not hear or entertain such oaths that they take. So he says, "V'yesh makilin ba'asiyas shutfus imakutim b'zman hazeh." Right. So there is you can be lenient nowadays, right? And this was being written. Shulchan Aruch is like 15th, 16th century. He says, "Mishum she'ein akutim b'zman hazeh nishvoim be'avodah zarah." When they take a shvua, they're not taking it in the name of the idol. Even though they mention it, their intent, their thought is on the same God in heaven that we have, right? But they have a certain partnership that they entertain. But basically, he's saying that they've softened a little bit over time, and it's possible for us to do business with them. So, continuing on the discussion, are they really idol worshippers? He says, he's quoting here the note of Yehuda, right? And this is 18th century in Prague. Prague is Czechoslovakia, right? So this is European. He says, "Because of my demargala b'pumayhu the inshish ein b'nei noach mitzuvim al hashituv," that they are not prohibited from having these partnerships, right? It's a mistake, right? Which the Ramah says, It's not the intent. Elalomar kishagoy nishba b'avodah zara im shituf shem shamayim. When the non-Jew makes this oath in a partnership, to a partnership, right? In that case, Eina Omer Eliyato, and he doesn't say this is my God, Eina Musar Akach. So in that case, basically it's one more person stating that you can accept their oaths, or you can be involved in business dealings with them, because their oaths are not oaths to the Avodah Zara. So we come to an interesting one now. You know, we live in a world where we're doing business with people. We have friends who are not in the same faith as us, and there are going to be instances where they're going to want us to come and celebrate with them, or you know, they used to say that Ed Koch himself, he was proud of the fact that the cardinal said that if you want to know how to behave in a church, look at Ed Koch. You know? So because he was so frequently in St. Patrick's Cathedral and other churches. But it's not so clear that you're permitted to go into right? And the Gemara goes through a whole discussion about entering their temples, approaching their temples. In fact, the Gemara says that you should not even get close to the door of the temple. But you know, we're faced with this situation. So here's one. He says, is it permitted for a Jew to go into a gathering place of the Christians? And the answer is, in Avodah Zara Mavur, you're not even allowed to get close to the door of this Avodah Zara, right? And if the church is in Avodah Zara, so you're not permitted to go close to that. Shnemar, al tikra al pesach beso. Do not approach the doorway of its home, right? The King Kosra Tosfos, and he's quoting Tosfos, they said, Hine Mavur Rambam, and also he's quoting Rambam, Shanotrim od Avodah Zarahim, that the Christians are idol worshippers. Umemela din knesios kebes Avodah Zara mamash, and their churches are like the temples to Avodah Zara. Lachain bor meor meoj asu levake b'knesios anotrim. So it says you cannot go into their churches. And he said b'sikum, and he said to sum up, Adavar borish asur b'hechle levake b'knesios shanotrim. It's not allowed, certainly not allowed to go into them. Val madriche tiaros. Now this is an interesting one. We all have been on tours of Israel, right? And there are tours which take the tourists to, you know, their places. He says, and to the tour guides, right? I just found out somebody's a tour guide in Tripoli. I don't know, did you take them into churches when you did your tour? No. So he's madriche tiaros. What?
Tripoli, there's very few churches.
Okay, right, so you didn't have the problem, right. So, and it's on the tour guides, you should be careful, that not only should you, after all, if you go in there, it's a problem, but if you're a tour guide and you bring other Jews in there, you are bringing them to a situation of doing something they shouldn't. To bring them to those churches, so somebody, you might be leading a group of Jews who don't know that it's not permitted to go into church, and you take them in as a tour guide. So you yourself, the Jewish tour guide, are in violation, and so too you've brought your customers to a situation where they're violating something. They may not even have realized that it was a problem. So, continuing on, so that the Rambam says, so what can you do now? There are churches everywhere. He's Lafichak Yesh Ladash, Kol Ir Me'ari Ha'uma Ha'notzrim, Sheyesh Lahem Ba'Bama. And they all have these altars, every city you go into, right? You can see how many churches they have in the towns, right? Ritzoni Lomar Beis Tfilasam, that it is a place where they pray. Ashehu Beis Avodah Zara below Suffolk, that it is a place of idol worship, undoubtedly, without a doubt, right? Hareza ein mutal avor bo b'kavana. Therefore, you can't go through that city, says the Rambam. V'kol shekela durba, and certainly can't live there, right? So I noticed there's a nice big church out on Boynton Beach Boulevard, not very far from us, right? So here we are, we're living there, right? So he says, Avo, but Hashem Masranu b'yedei, actually neither ba'areim ba'al karpeinu, and it could be a certain circumstance where we're living there because we can't really do anything about it. L'kayim Yehudo hara ba'avodosam sham Elokim me'aseh yadai adam. So basically he's saying that people are worshiping things that are made of stone and wood. Im zehu din ha'ir, so if that's the ruling of the city, kal v'chomer l'din beis avoda zara atzmo. So after all, it seems like you can't go into the church at all. Maybe you can't live there. But what winds up happening is that we realize that it's all been watered down. Their attitude is not the same as it once was, and therefore we are permitted, we have no choice. We have to live somewhere, and there are churches all around us. But it could be that maybe certain areas where the people are very fundamentalist, maybe it's not the greatest thing for Jews to be living there. But it seems like we can live. But here's an interesting question: when JFK was assassinated, so his funeral, I remember watching it on TV,
Yeah.
right? So the funeral procession was on November 5th, 1963, and it took place inside of the Catholic Church, and it was televised, right? So are you permitted to watch that program?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, well, again, not so questioned, right? So,
The Rambam addresses that.
pardon?
The Rambam addresses watching TV.
Well, Rabbi Soloveitchik does, and Rabbi Herschel Schachter quotes him, and it's brought down here. He says, Kishenirtzach Anasi Kennedy, when John Kennedy was assassinated, Arvu Halvayoso, the Knessia Catholic, that his funeral was arranged and took place in a Catholic church, right? For Harba Yehudim America, his taklu the televizia, B'chadei Rosa Sanase, many Americans watched on TV. I have to say I was among them. We saw you too, right?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yisrael al Kaprobeinu. No. And the rabbis apparently were not Rabbi Billy, he never spoke out about it. He probably weren't born.
I heard this one from Rabbi Schachter, or
You
from
heard
Rabbi
it?
Aaron Kahn. I think he said Rabbi Salvage was furious. Furious.
Furious, right?
Furious that people were watching a Catholic ceremony.
And what does he say? He's Omar Shehayos Shalafi Chuki Hadas Hakatlis Mukubal Eslam Shafni Shemishtate B'Taksid Hapalchan Shalhem Derech Iskaklus. Basically, they believe if you are watching that you can participate in their ceremony. So it's I'm just going to finish his statement, but parenthetically, when people were not coming to shul in the beginning of the COVID situation, so the shuls quickly got everything up on Zoom. But if somebody's watching on Zoom, is he a member of a minyan? Technically, no. So, but according to the Catholics, if you're watching their service on TV, you are participating.
That's why they televise their services.
What?
That's why they televise their services.
Because they want more customers, right? So,
But even with Zoom, and I know that there was at least one rav in Israel who said that if you're on Zoom, you can say Kaddish with the minyan. Yeah, if you're on Zoom, because I'm trying to think who it was from Gush who came out and said that you can't be counted in the minyan, but if there's a minyan there and you're on Zoom, then you can say
Kaddish is a unique situation, and a lot of people have a lot of different. I remember when JFK Jr. crashed his airplane, there were people who went to say Kaddish. It's an emotional thing. So whether a particular rabbi somewhere said that you could do it or couldn't do it, it's certainly not accepted that you're part of the minyan. However, what does Rabbi Soloveitchik say? He says, "Harei nimsa shekol osam haYehudim shestaklu the halavaya all these Jews that are watching the funeral, Havu Mishtatfim, V'palchan Avoda Zara Shalem, are participating in the worship of their Avoda Zara, right? B'vadai Isur Gomor Hayavizeh, and it is certainly a definite transgression, right? Mali Nipnas Hu Al Toh HaKnesset Osir, just as I'm not allowed to go into a church. Oh, Machnis Es HaKnesset Al Toh Beso, can I bring the church into my home? So it's not permitted to watch these ceremonies. So you know, I guess when the king is crowned, or all kinds of ceremonies are televised, and they take place. And they take place in churches. Are we permitted to watch that on TV? Probably not.
And what if it's in a movie?
What?
5 weeks ago,
5 weeks ago.
Charlie Kirk.
Right.
All right.
Right. So that was a church service. Right?
Whatever it was, I haven't watched it, but there was no question in my mind that it was.
Fell into this category.
Yeah.
Okay. So that takes care of that. So and then certain idols have, aside from the Catholic ritual, certain idols have certain well-known ways of worshiping them. So the one that they're mentioning here is called Marculus. We translate it as Mercury. It's not really Mercury, but they used to throw stones at it, or they make little heaps of stones, and that was the way that they worshipped it. So the Shulchan Aruch says, Haroa Marculus, O Shar Avodas Kafam. If somebody sees Marculus or other types of idols, Omer, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shenasan erech apayim lovdei Rutzono. So basically, you make a bracha that Hashem is merciful to those who are foolish, basically. We don't, if you see it again 30 days on, you don't have to say it again. But basically, you have to take note if you see something like this. And he says, we don't make a bracha today, right? So Sharei anu megudolim beinehem v'roen osam tamid. So, and this is basically the kula, the leniency, which allows us to live here.
Does this curriculum make a distinction between the different, I hate this word, sects of Christianity? In other words, is Catholicism, Protestantism, Methodist,
Right. So
Lutheran, whatever.
right. And so what the rabbi is asking is how is Christianity practiced, right? So in some, so they're mentioning here the Catholics. So I guess in the times of let's say the Rambam or others, their types of worship, they would bow down, they would prostrate themselves on the ground. They don't do that anymore. And so that's why I brought out that statement of the Rashbam about Rashi, about his grandfather, and what his grandfather said, that things change over time. It doesn't mean, I mean, this is a topic of conversation sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning. You wonder, what are we talking about when we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? But has the religion evolved? The Jewish religion does not evolve. It meets certain challenges based on halacha, but so the fact that the Christians, the Catholics in particular, do not practice the way that they used to, so that allows us to view it in a certain leniency. And actually, if you find, let's say, if somebody has on the mantle of their house a hotai, that's this Japanese god with a big belly, and that's an idol. Or you go, or they have, somebody has on the wall of their house a tapestry with an Indian god on it. That's
Totem pole.
Totem pole. So these are all idols, but we've gotten used to them, and so that doesn't mean that we're going to give any importance to them. But according to the Gemara, only the non-Jew can nullify the idol. So if you go into someone's home and they consider that totem pole to have some kind of power, then you have to be careful not to go in there. But the Gemara talks about the case of the wars of the Midianites when the Jews conquered Midian. So there was a lot of material that they were allowed to keep, right? And part of it was the silver and the gold that they melted down from the idols that they found, or that, after the conquest. So the question is, how are they allowed to do that? And the answer is that the Midianites themselves had, by virtue of the fact that, first of all, they ran away, they left the idol behind. That showed that they did not consider that it was important. And then some of them were broken, and once they're broken, they're also considered the same way. But basically, we need to pay attention to how they are acting. And so I'll give you another one. How about the Mormons? Right?
The Christians say, how about the Mormons?
Right. Are
they,
Mormons
Christian?
You had something you want to say? No. Oh.
No, I just had a question regarding the nuance between Jews and Catholics versus Jews and Protestants. Because Protestants don't have that same Trinity belief that the Catholics do. That was one of the main things with Martin Luther. The issue of not praying to a supreme being, no pope, etc. No, their artifacts, their Christian artifacts are different between the Catholics and the Protestants. So, do you have that same injunction, or is the injunction as rigid with the Protestants? Just
Right.
as
So
curiosity.
I think that's what Rabbi Villa was bringing out. That the Christians, it's a pretty big
It's a
group
big
of
umbrella.
people, right? It's a big umbrella, and how they all practice is
But does this curriculum address it? That's what I was asking.
so. Yeah, what they're saying is that we've gotten used to having them around, and the fact that they don't observe the same way, they don't all observe the same way as each other. So you have to be able to look at them and see what is it that they're doing. And the Rambam, who is like the source kind of the whole thing, so he was more or less an expert on Islam because of where he lived, but he didn't have a lot of Christians where he lived.
None.
Right? So I don't know. So then once we've established what is Avodah Zarah, what isn't Avodah Zarah, how do we react to the Avodah Zarah and how it presents itself? So just a simple one, if you have pictures or images of Avodah Zarah, he says, Kol hatzlamim shel avodas kochavim hanimtzoi b'kfarim, all the ones that are found in B'kfarim, in small villages, asura. Because they believe that the villagers were more devout. What? Right?
Aren't
So,
all the churches you've been talking about are places of Avodah Zarah?
so we pretty much say that a Christian church, certainly a Catholic church, is a place of Avodah Zarah. We're not permitted to go in there.
But Christians aren't, we earlier said that Christians aren't practicing Avodah Zarah, we could be partners with them. So they are not practicing Avodah Zarah, but the churches are?
So what they're saying is that the individual Christian, let's say, what are we talking about? We're not saying we're going to go to the wedding of his daughter, or that becomes a problem, right? If you're partnering with somebody, but we're saying that can we go into a business deal with them because there might come a situation where somebody needs to swear to something in court or something like that. So what they're saying here, the Shulchan Aruch is saying, is that when they take an oath and they put their hand on the Bible, they're saying they're swearing by God above. They believe that God has some partners, but it's God that they're swearing to. So that doesn't mean that the practices in their churches are something that we can entertain.
There's a basic difference, I think, between how you define Avodah Zarah for a Goy versus Avodah Zarah for a Jew. Trinity might not be an Avodah Zarah for a Goy,
Right.
but we Jews cannot practice Trinity. The rules aren't the same. So going into a church, for us, is forbidden, even though it might be perfectly permissible for a Christian going to that church.
Exactly right. And there are lots of opinions, some of them quoted here, that anything other than Jewish religion is Avodah Zarah for us. So it may not be Avodah Zarah for the person practicing it, but a Jew who converts to Islam, or a Jew goes into a mosque and participates with them, he's practicing Avodah Zarah, even though Islam itself may not be idol worship, but for us, it's Avoda Zarah for sure.
You said, or when you first started, that Rashi said it isn't Avodah Zarah. Now, how does that affect everything?
No,
It's not-
Rashi doesn't make a comment on it. The Rambam says that that Christianity is Avodah Zarah and Islam is not.
Right, so Rashi did not make any comments on that?
No, so we don't have anything from Rashi.
Oh, okay, that's not what we did.
But we do have something about the original proponent of Christianity, and there we have something from Sefer Daniel, who foretold this was going to happen, and he says that, and there's a Rav Sadia Gaon who predates the Rambam, right? He's like 10th century. He was 10th century, Rashi 11th, Rambam 12th. So in Daniel, it says, "V'yitem ahem rabim yamdu al melech hanegev u'bnei paritze amcha yinasu la'ami chazon v'nichshol." They want to put somebody up there as a leader, and they'll fail. And he says, why? He says, because, he says, Vedanti, he says, Sadia Gaon, Kachu shiyasu atzmam nevi'e kasheket, that they set themselves up as false prophets, which is what we say he was, right? V'cholmei chalomos, and they are dreamers of dreams, right? U'masiim lo eitza v'yachomu imo. So basically, and they're going to fail along with them. So it's funny that they'll look for certain psukim in Yeshayahu that sort of, they say foretold, but Daniel is telling you that these things could happen, and don't be taken in by people. And the Rambam actually gives a definition of how you can identify somebody who is the real Mashiach. How do you know who is the Mashiach? So he says that the real Mashiach, he says, "V'chi yesh mashal gadol mizah." Is there any larger? Is there any bigger? A mashal is a snare, a stumbling block, worse than thinking that somebody is the Mashiach who's not. He says, "Kol hanavim dibru sheMashiach go Yisrael mishmoshiam." The Mashiach is the Redeemer of the Jews. U'mekabes nitcheim nechazek mitzvosan, and he brings them together and he strengthens the observance of mitzvos. V'zer goram abed Yisrael b'cherem. But this one, Christianity, what happened? A lot of Jews died in the name of Christianity, right? So obviously this person could not have been the Mashiach, right? And to cause the Jews to be exiled, right? Torah, and to turn over the Torah. So and to bring the world to observe another God other than, in addition to God. So he says, but the thoughts of the creator of the world, cannot be changed, right? His ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. And now he says, Rambam says, and all the things about this individual, that came after him, this Yishmaeli, this is Ishmaelite. So he said there is a purpose which they serve, and that's an interesting thing too, because they have served to spread monotheism throughout the world, to in a certain sense prepare the world for the time when the Mashiach is going to come. So it's not all black and white that we need to, how we have to react to our neighbors and how they are. So it's kind of a interesting situation, and the ending of the whole thing is what I started out with, is it is not so partial. So I just want to give you, I know I'm sort of running on over time, but I like to do what I call value added.
Half a minute.
I have 1 minute, thank you.
Half a minute.
Half a minute. So value added is I'll take something not related to the topic we're talking about and talk about it a little bit. and so what I want to do in these few weeks that we're going to do is what I call Siddur anomalies, or something unusual in the Siddur, something maybe surprising, and try to understand what does it mean. So on Friday night in our Shemona Esrei, we say Elokeinu v'Elokeinu V'Seinu, we say B'Nuchaseinu, and so on. Kachenu b'Nuchasecha, Seinu Elokeinu b'Zoresecha, and then it says V'Nuchu Va Yisrael Mekadshei Shemecha. Right? It says V'Nuchu Va Yisrael Mekadshei Shemecha. So we should rest on that. We know that to mean that rest on Shabbos. Those who are consecrating and sanctifying the name of God. On Shabbos morning, on our Shemona Esrei, we say the same exact paragraph, but instead of saying V'Nuchu Va, we say V'Nuchu Vo. Right? Friday night Ba, Shabbos morning Bo. On Shabbos afternoon to Mincha, what do we say? We say V'Nuchu Vam. Right. So I asked Rabbi Teitz once, why is that? That we say Ba Friday night, Bo Shabbos morning, Bum Shabbos afternoon. So he said, well, what do we do on Friday night? Friday night, we can start Shabbos early. We're permitted to start Shabbos early. So technically, according to the calendar, it's not really Shabbos. So what are we doing? We're welcoming in Shabbos HaMalka. Shabbos itself, not the day, not the date. Shabbos. The Shabbos queen is feminine. Shabbos morning, it's Yom. So we know Yom is masculine, right? It's a Yom Tov, not Yom Tovah. So that's so we have Shabbos morning, we have the masculine. Friday night we have the feminine. By Shabbos afternoon already, we have all aspects of. That's how we have Bum. So I thought, but interestingly, just recently we were in Israel in the shul we were davening and uses the Koren Talpiot Siddur, and it's slightly different. It says, V'anchilenu Hashem Elokeinu b'avav ratzon shabsos kodshecha v'yinuchu vam Yisrael mekadshei shemecha. So now they take the vam to relate to many Shabbosos. So the Koren uses the Nusach HaGro. This is the Vilna Gaon's Siddur. This is what he did. So it's an interesting thing how the same word. And I just wanted to finish up with one quick thing from today's Daf Yomi. So if you learned Daf Yomi today, as we did, Rava has a question. Actually, Rava, he says, Omar Rava, Hilchasel Mashicha. The topic that's being discussed, this is the Masechta that we're learning is Masechta Zvachim related to offerings, and the way that the Gemara works is it gets all of the requirements out of the way first before it gets into the actual practice of the sacrifices. So it's talking about what disqualifies offerings that are brought in the temple in different ways that they are become disqualified, what it means, and so on. And Rava, I don't know if he was just having a bad day or didn't have his coffee yet, because he says, Hilchasel Mashicha, are we studying all this stuff? We don't have a temple now. Are we trying to make rules now for what's going to take place when the Mashiach comes and the base of Mikdash is going to be rebuilt? Amali Abai, so Abai said to him, come on, Rava. Abai and Rava were colleagues. Listening. We shouldn't learn any of this if we're going to say there's no practical application, right? We have no temple. So Rava says, are we studying for, and Abai says, so we shouldn't study any of it. He says, Ella Derosh Kaposocha. Study and you'll benefit from that. So Hachanami Derosh Kaposocha. So everything else that we're studying, even though it may not have a practical application, although what we talked about today certainly does have practical application, but generally speaking, Torah study, it has a value in its own. So I thank everyone.